Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about red flags. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, nice explanation, Frederick. So this was posted on a video that I made, which is called What are red flags that a company has a bad engineering culture? I want to ask you this. How about a lack of freedom or choice up to some degree of choosing how to implement a solution? This could be seen from what kind of This could be seen from what kind of platform engineering setup they have, I guess. What do you think? So the way I interpret this question is basically like, is a lack of choice in your own work process as a software developer a red flag that a company has bad engineering practices? I'm going to surprise the vast majority of you, maybe, and say no, it's not a red flag. It can be a red flag, but it's, in my perspective, it's a bigger thing than do you have choice or don't you have a choice. And this is where I'm going to be brutally honest with you and say that the vast majority of software developers are incompetent to the point where they are unable to make mature, good decisions on behalf of an IT company. And that doesn't mean that they're not good at what they do. What that means is that they are incapable of thinking about and seeing a larger picture than their own workflow. And these people should at no point ever be allowed to make any type of technical decisions on behalf of the company, because they will fuck the code base up beyond all recognition. And a company who has understood this will adopt practices to stop this sort of behavior. Now here's the key though. How do you fix this? Well, there are a few ways, and this is where I go and say basically that this is a double-edged sword. Because on the one side, if you try to control everything about what the software developers are doing, they're going to hate you for it. And if you don't do it well, the system is still going to be shit, or like the code base is going to be shit. On the other hand, if you let them do whatever they want, they're going to fuck the code base up, because you simply cannot, especially in the larger companies, there's no way for you to maintain a quality code base across like multiple teams and so forth. There is a pattern that I personally condone, which is, it's actually funny because it is the pattern that Google uses as well, and other projects as well, other companies as well, and that is the monorepo. Now you might ask, like, you can go on Google like what a monorepo is and all that good stuff, and there are pros and there are cons with monorepos. There are some really serious cons, but one of the things, and that's one of the reasons among many that Google does actually use this setup, is that it makes it possible for you to enforce a consistent code quality across the company. That is practically impossible if you have multiple repositories all across the place. It's really hard, and especially in the large companies where they have many different types of projects. Some stuff is being made in-house and some stuff is done by consultants and like all this stuff. And this is something that I work with as an example at my job, where I basically take care, one of the things, one of my responsibilities is to take code written by external consultants who couldn't give a shit, basically, in some cases, about like what's the vision of the company, and make sure that they are basically convert that into something that is usable for more than 2 months. That's what scalability is about at the larger companies usually. So having someone tell you that no, you are not allowed to use framework A or framework B, or like, well, you have to use this thing, is not actually an indicator necessarily that they have a bad culture. The best indicator, in my opinion, is to ask the question, based on the state of the code and the overall strategy, how are things going? That is the best thing. So what that basically means is that if you have, let's say for the sake of argument now, a very strict work process where they've standardized all the tools and you have very strict processes, so then there's always a range, but let's just say that you're on the far right side here. Everything is like really, really rigorous and strict and so forth. And you are delivering, and like the code is of a good quality, and there are tests, and like, you know, people are kind of happy like with delivery speed and all that stuff, then the thing is working. Then usually the way when I see this happen, it's due to the fact that you have one architect or a few architects, so you have senior software developers or people who are basically just better at this craft than the vast majority of the other people working in the company, who they are controlling the system, and for a very good reason, because they know this stuff better than you who is a junior software developer, or you who is a mid-level or whatever. I know that's not everything, something that people want to hear, especially when they think they're really good, but facts are facts. Some people are better at this stuff than other people, and pretending like all software developers is equal is just ignorant. But if, on the other hand, things are not looking so good, and things are not going in the right direction, and you have this set up, well, then it's probably because you actually put the wrong software developers or the wrong architect, and this happens. Oh God, it happens. There are some horror stories on this topic where you put an incompetent architect or software developer at this level of power, where they have basically full say over how everybody else does their job, and they fuck the company up to the point where it's like, it's not even funny how badly these sorts of things can go. And so that's the indicator that is best for you to use. Don't look at someone who's saying use A, B, and C, that there's a problem with being very opinionated about the tool stack. Look at what are the results, what's actually being delivered. That is the thing that is going to determine everything. And if you say, let's say for the sake of argument, you're on the far left here, and you say everybody can do whatever they want. I have never, I'm not saying that it cannot work in theory, but I've never seen that work at any company ever. I've never seen a company that didn't like have their code base basically fall to shit pretty much within a few years when having that strategy. It's actually one of the biggest backtracks on the microservices architecture, because in the beginning one of the selling points for microservices was that people were saying that, well, you have these distributed systems, and the best part is that everybody can pick their own stack. And yet that sounds awesome until you realize that when you have 13 different languages and code bases that are in vastly different levels of quality, because everybody's just YOLOing everything, it's really hard to keep a consistently working system. It's hard to maintain quality and reliability in such a world. But on the other hand, you can give some freedom, and that's always that's the challenge. And this is why I argue that the only people who can do this is like the senior software developers, and not just the seniors. You have to be more than senior to do this well. You have to have a tech lead mindset, be a senior software developer, and have a tech lead mindset to get this right. If you're not both of these, you will fail at this. I don't care if you're an architect or whatever. It's a very special sort of person who is required to make this to make this kind of work, if that makes sense. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, it's not a red flag if your company has a very strict policy on what tools you are allowed to use as part of their company. It's not necessarily. What you should measure is, all right, what is the policy around tooling and choices made within the company? Like, how much autonomy do you have? How much is controlled, etc., etc.? And what is the output of that? Because if you see that things are actually working, it's usually because the people who are making these sorts of decisions are good at what they do. A good example of a structure like this that has been working sort of is, say, the Linux Foundation and Linus Torvalds. Or the TC39 standards and so forth, where you have a group of people. I mean, sure, you're trading some stuff here because they're basically, you could move faster, but you don't want speed in these scenarios. You want really high quality output. And if that is what your goal is, it's much better to have a top-down architecture in terms of decision making, where at the top you have the most experienced, best people you have on hand make decisions for everybody else, because that is going to guarantee consistency. key point here though, it's going to be make things consistent. That doesn't mean that it's going to be good, and that's the double-edged sword. If you put the wrong people at the top, everything shit rolls downhill. But on the flip side, if you let people do whatever they want, that's going to make some people happy short term, but it's not going to be sustainable. There is a very good reason why companies such as, say, Google has a monorepo, and that's a monorepo consists of billions of lines of code. There is a cost to having that sort of architecture, but the benefit is that they can control the quality of their software, which is probably the most important thing when you get to a little bit of scale. Have a great day.